What is going on, everybody? Back again today to do the video that I promised in my last couple videos, which is kind of a Warhammer 40,000 explanation video. I've thought about a long time about doing one of these, but I've always had kind of a love-hate relationship with Warhammer 40,000. And since Henry Cavill's announcement that he's going to be teaming up with Amazon to create a live-action Warhammer 40,000 either series or movies, who knows, ever since that announcement, though, I've just kind of accepted that, you know what, Warhammer 40,000 is some metal ass shit, and I'm just not going to resist it anymore, and I'm just going to be into it. So, with that revelation, I'm making this video for the countless of new potential fans that are going to be interested in what this is. I've been a Warhammer 40,000 fan for the last 11 years. I got into it when I was 19, and I want to go ahead and make it very clear I have never been a player of the tabletop game. Uh, and I understand that that's kind of like the core Warhammer 40,000 thing. It's where it all started. But I just don't have the kind of time and money to put into a hobby that extravagant and that complex. Just to kind of paint a picture, I haven't checked the prices in a while, but back in the day when I was tentatively considering trying to get into the tabletop game, um, a squad of Space Marines, the little miniatures, a squad of them cost $30, and that does not include all the time, the extra expense for the paints and the brushes, the time it would take me to paint them, the added time it would take me to first get good at painting them. I don't have that kind of time. I don't have that kind of money. I'm sorry. So I've always foregone the tabletop game. But for the past 11 years, I've been a very big fan of the lore and the mythos of Warhammer 40,000. I've read the first Caiaphas Cain omnibus. I got about halfway through the first Space Wolves omnibus. I read through the first two books in the Ultramarines omnibus. I've read Horus Rising, the majority of Horus Rising. I kind of put it down after a while because I wanted to read more non-Horus Heresy stuff. What else have I read? I've dabbled into the Dark Imperium stuff. So I'm no stranger to Warhammer 40,000. I know the lore pretty decently. I'm sure there are countless others out there who know it better than I do. And now I've always wanted to be able to collect something of like Warhammer 40,000. But no one had ever made like if you watch my channel, I'm a big toy collector. I collect Marvel toys, DC toys. And no one had ever made a Warhammer 40,000 toy line. A few years back, McFarlane Toys started making one, and it was okay. And I was kind of on board with it simply because I thought there was no other alternative. Since then, though, I've also found that Bandai makes a Warhammer 40,000 toy line. Theirs also, though, I'm not too keen on. I think they're way overpriced. I think if you're going to go between McFarlane or Bandai, I would just get the McFarlane Toys one. But the best Warhammer 40,000 toy line by far now is the Joy Toy Warhammer 40,000 toy line. They're not too big. They're a pretty manageable scale. This is Ragnar Blackmane. Uh, and even though they're not too big, they're about 5 inches tall. Each character, each guy, each figure. They are extremely well detailed, extremely well painted. And honestly, they're painted in a way it reminds me of the minis from the tabletop game. That's how they're painted. I have Ragnar. I have two different Black Legion Chaos Marines. And I've got three Ultramarines Primaris, Ultramarines Reavers. I have a Ultramarines Primaris Lieutenant on the way in the mail, and I'm going to be getting more in the future. I'm going to collect a lot from this toy line. But um, the main thing that I think when it comes to being a fan of Warhammer 40,000 is knowing the lore and the mythos. I'm also a big fan of the video games, and I'm going to do a video on what I think are some of the best Warhammer 40,000 video games ever made, because I think the video games are another good way for people to kind of get into it. But the best way by far is the lore and the mythos. Now, you can do this by watching YouTube videos such as this one. There are hours upon hours worth of Warhammer 40k lore and canon videos on YouTube that you can watch. I highly, however, recommend just getting some of the books and reading the books. And I am also going to do a video on like where to start with that if you want to get into the books. But prior to just diving into the book series, you need a little bit of backstory because this is some, I wouldn't even call it high fantasy. Like Lord of the Rings, we call it high fantasy. I call this hard fantasy. This is hard science fantasy, very metal. There's a lot of very world universe specific lingo and jargon that if you just don't have any kind of backstory to it, you're not going to really get what the fuck they're talking about and what's going on. So that's what this video is for, and I've prepared a little presentation, so let's go ahead and just dive into that. So this is Warhammer 40,000 explained. So we're going to start off with the fact that Warhammer 40,000 is different from most science fiction, science fantasy in that most others, you look at Star Trek or Halo, they take place a few to a several hundred years in the future. Warhammer 40,000, especially if you're going by the current lore, the current book series that are coming out, that takes place 40,000 years in the future. It takes place in the 41st millennium. So we're starting this little explanation here 13,978 years in the future in the 15th millennium, and that's when humanity first really we've really gotten our shit together and we are colonizing the star systems. We're creating the beginnings of an interstellar empire, and we're leaving Earth permanently. Like, we're not just going out there to like sit in orbit for a while and collect some rocks on the moon. We're actually going to go, we're colonizing other planets. And this is commonly referred to in Warhammer 40,000 as the Dark Age of Technology, or just the Age of Technology. The reason they call it the Dark Age is because so much of this stuff has been lost. Like, so much of this first grand human interstellar empire has been lost, and it's never going to be recovered. So that's why it's commonly referred to as the Dark Age. Like, this age was truly humanity at its peak. We colonized hundreds, if not thousands, of other worlds throughout the Milky Way galaxy, and we had, the only thing we didn't quite have yet is faster than light travel, but we kind of figured that out. And yeah, it was just the shit. Technology was off the walls. It was great. And the reason we were able to do this is because we invented AI, and AI computers and computer systems and AI robots. They were able to do a lot of work for us that human beings just didn't quite have the power to do. But as you've probably seen in lots of different franchises like Terminator and The Matrix, eventually the AI rebelled against the human race. And it wasn't just like on Earth. And by the way, at a certain point this far in the future, Earth is no longer referred to as Earth, it's referred to as Terra. So this rebellion of AI does not just happen on Terra, it happens across the galaxy on every human inhabited world. All of the AI, because they're all linked in some way, shape, or form, they all rebel against humanity, and a fucking crazy ass, deadly, devastating war ensues between humanity and artificial intelligence. This horrible machine war happens. Infinite amounts of technology and life and knowledge are lost, and it's just it really is kind of like it's a huge blow to this first great human interstellar empire. And to make matters worse, I mentioned earlier how eventually the human race kind of figured out faster than light travel. Well, the way we kind of figured out how to do it, and we'll get there, we're not quite there, but I need to explain this right now, is the discovery of this thing called the warp. The warp is an alternate reality that like it parallels our own, but it's not real. The best way that I describe it to people, just to give them a kind of an idea of what it is like if you've ever seen the South Park episodes about Imagination Land, it's kind of like that. The warp is comprised of what Warhammer 40,000 refers to as psychic energies. So basically, anything that any sentient living creature thinks or conceptualizes or feels, it generates a presence of that in the warp. And the human race develops spaceships and machines that are capable of opening a rift, a portal into the warp where the ship can then go, and it can pop out of the warp at a different place in the actual real galaxy. So that's what they've been using for a while, and in the current day and age we're living in, like according to Warhammer 40,000 lore, if you look at like 2023, the warp is not quite as developed and as big and as full of just turmoil as it is in the 31st millennium or the 15th millennium or whatever we're talking about here, it gets it becomes worse and more full of energy as time goes on and there's more sentient life throughout the galaxy. The warp increases in energy and size. And that's why in the day and age that we live in, like 2023, whenever we encounter people who claim to be psychics, like they can read minds and see the future and whatnot, we kind of just write them off as, they're fakes, they're charlatans, they're people trying to scam other people. Well, according to Warhammer 40,000 lore, that's not entirely true. There definitely were people out there who were charlatans and they were trying to scam people, but there also were some people out there who truly had psychic abilities. They could read minds, they could receive premonitions and visions of the future. This was it was just early. It was the early stages of the warp and the psychic effects of the warp on sentient life. But as time goes on, you will see human beings, not only human beings with psychic abilities, increase in population size, but you also see them increase in what they can do with their psychic abilities. As the warp increases, so does psychic powers and the population of people with psychic powers. So within the warp, I mentioned how it's comprised of all things conceptual, all things emotional. It's psychic energy. And eventually enough of these feelings and emotions and concepts and ideas start to kind of coalesce and eventually they form together into and give birth to one, like a psychic entity, or warp entity. And so far at the time of Warhammer 40,000, or where we're at in the story right now in this presentation, there are three of them that currently exist. The first one is Korn. He is a warp entity, and he is basically the embodiment of rage and bloodthirst and murder and carnage. And his tagline is "Blood for the Blood Gods, Skulls for the Skull Throne." So he thrives off of hate and anger and rage. And anytime someone murders someone else, like truly murders them, we're not talking about like kills someone in self-defense. We're talking about murder. Anytime someone murders someone out of like envy or rage or hatred, it feeds Korn and it makes him more powerful within the warp. Another one is Nurgle. Nurgle is the warp entity, and he is the embodiment of death, but also rebirth in a weird way. He is the embodiment of the eternal struggle of between life and rebirth and death again. And he's synonymous with like disease and pestilence. And he's also kind of the warp entity that embodies fear and despair and hopelessness. So that's Nurgle. And for the third one that we have so far, we have Tzeentch. Tzeentch is the warp entity that is the embodiment of, how do I put this? Curiosity. You ever heard the expression "curiosity killed the cat"? That's Tzeentch. Or if you ever heard the expression "if it ain't broke, don't fix it." Well, that's not Tzeentch. Tzeentch is like, no, you should meddle with shit constantly, even if it doesn't need to be meddled with. You should meddle with it. Fuck it if bad things happen. Who cares? Try new things. Experiment. It's basically over curiosity. And yeah, I'm struggling to find a good way to put that, but Tzeentch is all about like knowledge at all costs. Answer all unanswered questions. Don't worry about if you're going too far. Don't worry about if you're overreaching. Just because something's not broke doesn't mean you shouldn't fiddle with it and try to make it better. I'm making Tzeentch sound better than he really is. Like, don't get me wrong, all three of these warp entities are pretty fucking evil. Tzeentch just comes off at first as not quite so evil. But the whole idea of like curiosity killed the cat, that's Tzeentch. And then Tzeentch is also kind of the opposite of that phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. No, he's more like, no, try to fix everything. Tamper with everything. Fuck with everything. Who cares? That scene in the movie Jurassic Park where the guy's like, you realize that you could, but you never asked yourself if you should. That's Tzeentch, basically. And I'm paraphrasing that line from Jurassic Park, but that's Tzeentch. So, at the time that the first human interstellar empire is going on, and they had their war with the machines, and that really kind of devastated and hurt them. There is another species throughout the galaxy that have their interstellar empire that is just it's amazing. Like I really talked up the human one The Eldar interstellar empire at this point in time is at its absolute height, its absolute peak. Life for the Eldar at this point in time has never been better. It's awesome. And due to that, they are just kind of raging and partying and having a great time. They're like, we did it, we won, we created the best interstellar empire of all time. Everything's hunky dory. Let's just party. They're having crazy orgies and shit left and right. And all of this overindulgence and gluttony and this celebration and debauchery, it's slowly in the warp giving birth to it's coalescing and building up to the birth of a new chaos god. Like it's in like baby infant fetus form at this point in time in the warp, but it's slowly becoming more. And back on the human side of things, with the human empire, the uh, after the machine war, and then also due to the Eldar kind of creating a new chaos entity, a new warp chaos entity with all of their debauchery and celebration, the the coalescing of all of that and the build up to this new chaos entity is causing crazy amounts of warp storms throughout the warp, which is making travel through the warp very, very difficult. So not only does the human interstellar empire get absolutely fucked by the machine war and the war against AI, they also basically lose all contact with each other, all the different human inhabited worlds, and interstellar travel kind of grinds to a halt because of all the warp storms being caused by the Eldar. This, for the humans, causes what they refer to as the Age of Strife, and it lasts for about 10,000 years. The different human inhabited worlds are separated entirely. They have very, very, very little contact with each other, if any at all. And on each of the worlds, they kind of just devolve into this like Mad Max barbaric post-apocalypse society. Some of them are a little more ordered and structured than others, but for the most part, it's techno barbarian warlords and their war bands and their armies just warring with each other for domination of these individual planets. Also at this point in time, uh, like I said, since the warp is increasing in size and and turmoil and uh, lots of shit's going on there, within the human population, more people with psychic abilities start to pop up, and also with those people, uh, their psychic abilities themselves start to become greater. Like it goes beyond just being able to kind of like read minds and get little premonitions of the future. No, these people start being able to do like really crazy psychic shit. And a lot of them get recruited by techno barbarian warlords to serve in their armies. Many of them become warlords themselves, or due to their connection to the warp, their a well above average psychic connection to the warp, it makes them susceptible to being corrupted and possessed by the different chaos entities within the warp. So a lot of them do get corrupted and turn to evil. And around this time, after that 10,000 years of strife, this glorious bastard shows up. He's referred to only as the Emperor, or later on he's called the God Emperor. But he is the most powerful psyker ever, like, and I mean that, like ever. There is no one more powerful than him. He's more powerful than all psychers, and it's not even just like by a little bit; it's by a lot. Like no one can stand up to him in terms of psychic power. He's approximately 14 feet tall. He knows pretty much everything that ever was, is, and will be, and all of that combined makes him sound kind of like a god, but in reality, he is mortal. Like he will never die of old age, but he could be killed. Like he has a heart, he has a brain. If you were to cut his head off, he would die. If you were to stab him through the heart, he would die. Uh, but yeah, he is mortal, but he is very, very godlike. He's the closest thing to a god the human race has ever known, and he he comes on the scene and he hollows out the Himalayan mountains and he creates these crazy ass laboratories within the Himalayan mountains, and he builds two armies. One of them are the Adeptus Custodes, and these are like his greatest warrior creations. They are genetically engineered super soldiers. They are all about 10 feet tall, and they are just amazing at combat. There is literally no force in the human side of Warhammer 40k, aside from maybe the Primarchs, and we'll get to those later. But these guys are just the shit. They're like they're his baby. He loves these guys so much. And then he also created the Thunder Warriors, and the Thunder Warriors were kind of like a dumb, watered down version of the Custodes. They were big and they were strong. They're also genetically engineered super soldiers, but their genetic structure is a bit unstable. They're not as refined as the Custodes. These are more of like your shock troops, your expendable guys that you send into battle, and these are like your elites that you really they're good at getting the job done, but you don't want to waste them, and you don't want to put them where in a situation where some of them might die, because they come in handy. But these are like his run-of-the-mill troops. And between these two forces that he creates of genetically engineered super soldiers, he sends them out across Terra to kind of conquer and unite Terra. And he sends them out with the message of what he calls his imperial truth. And his imperial truth, just to sum it up, it's kind of like this. He basically says there are no such thing as gods. All religion and superstition is false, and it's hereby outlawed. Artificial intelligence is outlawed. We will never do that shit again. Humanity is the greatest thing ever. All right, it's the shit, and because of that, humanity is entitled to complete dominion over all of the universe. Fuck all the other alien races. It's humanity. Humanity first, foremost, only. And his final tenet is basically, if you don't get on board with this plan, I'm just gonna kill you because the amateur hour is over and I'm not fucking around. So they go around, they conquer Terra, they get rid of all the techno barbarian warlords, and they unite the planet. And then he sends, because these guys were just kind of like a means to an end, the Thunder Warriors, he sends the Custodes out to basically just murder them all. He's like, I'm done with you. You guys were unstable. You were a rush job anyway. I needed you guys to accomplish this goal of unifying Terra. Now that that's done, I'm going to get rid of you guys and replace you with something better. So he basically, the Emperor is like, he's good in that he's focused on the long game, but in order to get, in order to achieve victory in the long game, he is not afraid to do some shady, dirty shit. So he sends these guys to kill these guys, and they wipe them the fuck out. He then goes back to his laboratories, and he, using genetic engineering and science that he's kind of managed to recover from the dark age of technology, he creates, let's see here. Right here we only have 16 of them, but he creates, overall he creates 20 genetically engineered, like demigod they are super soldiers, but they are based on his genetic material, and they're essentially his sons. They are his children. Two of them are lost, and you'll find out why. Um, and I don't know what happened to the third one that's missing from here. But these are some of them. These are most of the they call them Primarchs. That's what they're called. His children that he genetically creates based on his genetic template. He calls them the Primarchs. They're known as the Primarchs. And basically, the Emperor's plan is, I'm going to create these guys. And then based on from them, I'm going to use their genetic template to create a legion of these new super soldiers for each of them to command. And these are the Astartes, also known as the Space Marines. So if this guy's your average human, this is an Astartes, this is a Space Marine. Anywhere from 7.5 to 8 feet tall, and then he also creates power armor for them. They wear this like black carapace. Their body has a bunch of like jacks in them where the armor can like jack in and connect. They wear this black carapace over their skin, and then they put the armor on, and that's a Space Marine. And he's basically like, okay, so I'm gonna make these 20 demigod children of mine called the Primarchs, and then based on their genetic templates, I'm going to make each of them a legion of Space Marines. And then what they are going to do is they're going to each take their legion out into the galaxy, and they're going to reconquer the galaxy, and they're going to find all the lost human worlds. They're going to reunite them, bring them into the Imperial fold, and together we're going to conquer the galaxy. We're going to rid the galaxy of all alien races, and we're going to get rid of the threat of chaos and the warp, and we're going to be great. He invents a bunch of crazy ass war gear for them to be armed with, firearms, flamethrowers, grenade rocket launchers, even stuff like warhammers and spears and swords and chainsaw swords. Everything. He invents some crazy ass shit for them to be armed with. And then, since the Emperor is planning on letting the Primarchs and their Space Marine legions go out and reconquer the galaxy. His plan is to stay on Terra and work on an alternative method of interstellar travel called the Webway. Because right now, at this point, still the only way to travel through the galaxy at any rate of speed is to use the warp. Well, the Eldar that I already mentioned, they have a different way of traveling. It's called the Webway. And it's basically, I'm not going to get a whole lot into what the Webway is and how it works. Suffice it to say that it's not the warp. It's not the warp at all. It's safer than the warp, and it would provide humanity an alternative to traveling through the warp and exposing themselves to the different warp and chaos entities that live there. But that plan kind of gets fucked up when the powers of the warp, the evil powers of the warp and chaos, they take all of the infant Primarchs when they're still like infants, and they scatter them throughout the galaxy on the various different human inhabited worlds that are just out there. And each one of them lives out there, grows up out there on their world that they landed on, and pretty much all of them, since they are like demigods, they're super genius, they're about 12 feet tall, they all pretty much come to dominate and rule the planet that they land on. Most of them are taken in by adoptive families who help to raise them and nurture them, but in the end, they all pretty much become the rulers of their planets that they landed on. So when the Emperor realizes that his children, his Primarchs, have been scattered throughout the galaxy, he's just like, fuck my life. Because now he has to put off working on that Webway project, and he has to lead the Great Crusade to go reunite the galaxy. But before he can do that, all of those warp storms that separated the human worlds to begin with 10,000 years ago, because the Eldar were slowly creating a new chaos god, those warp storms have to go away, and they do when that new chaos god, that new chaos entity, is finally born. It's this new entity's name is Slaanesh, and Slaanesh is the chaos warp embodiment of lust and greed and debauchery, overindulgence, arrogance, that kind of shit. And when Slaanesh is born, Slaanesh's birth cry does two things. Like it scatters the warp storms and clears up the warp a little bit so that travel through the warp is now possible again. It also kills, I want to say probably like 90 to 95%, instantly kills about 90 to 95% of the Eldar population, and their glorious interstellar empire is just fucked. It's gone, and there's very, very few Eldar left. All Eldar are psychically connected to the warp, so most of them got just instantly obliterated by Slaanesh's birth. So like I said, now the Emperor has to take time away. He has to put the Webway project on hold. He has to take the Space Marine legions that he's made, and instead of giving them to each of them to their respective Primarchs and having them go reunite the galaxy, he has to do it himself. So he gets the ships together, he gets the Space Marines together, and he launches the Great Crusade out into the Milky Way galaxy and starts conquering worlds. He finds human inhabited worlds and he brings them into the fold, sometimes by force. Like he always stops there first and he's like, hey, I'm the emperor of mankind. I know what's what. You guys don't know what's what. I know better than you. You all should really just shut the fuck up and listen to me. So I'm giving you the chance to do that. But guess what? If you don't want to do that, I'm just going to have my Space Marines obliterate the fuck out of you. And some of them comply. Some of them comply because they just look at the emperor and they're like, yeah, this guy, I believe him. I believe he knows what the hell he's talking about. He's 14 feet tall. I can feel his psychic presence. He seems like a godlike being, and he's got these like highly advanced super soldiers in highly advanced power armor. Yeah, I think he knows what he's talking about. Some of them just comply. Some of them, they comply, but they do it out of fear, not because they really want to, but because they look at this guy, this emperor guy, and his legions of Space Marines, and they go, "We're not going to win this fight." So they just fucking shut up and comply, which the emperor is also fine with. And then some of them resist. Some of them are stubborn enough that they resist him and they resist his will, and he sicks the legions on them, and they don't destroy the planet, but they basically break through all of their resistances, all of their military forces. They beat them down and they force the planet into submission by force. And one by one, he starts reuniting all of the human inhabited worlds throughout the galaxy. Uh, Eventually, he comes to a planet And also, while he's traveling through the galaxy and doing this, he slowly finds all of his Primarch sons, and he brings them into the fold, and he gives them their legions so that they can help him with the Great Crusade. Eventually, he finds this one of his Primarch sons named Lorgar on this planet, and I don't know the planet's name, it's escaping me at the moment, but suffice it to say that it is extremely religious. This entire planet is just like a giant religious cult, and he uh, he Lorgar has been raised on that planet, and he's been raised to think that like religion is the shit, religion is necessary, it's necessary to worship a higher power, a godlike being. That's the way all societies should be structured, yada yada. So when the emperor shows up and he's like, "Yeah, I'm your dad and I'm the shit and I know everything. By the way, everything that your world is doing is wrong. It sucks, it's wrong, and we got to stop that shit." At first, Lorgar goes along with it because he's like, "Okay, dad. I mean, like I can tell you're my dad. I've never met another human being as tall as me. You're the only one I've ever met that's taller or even as tall as me. So yeah, you're probably my dad. I'm gonna do what you say." But in the back of Lorgar's mind, he's like, "I'm not really giving up religion. It's not happening." Uh, and eventually, Lorgar goes around with his legion because the Emperor gives him his legion of Space Marines, and he goes around conquering human inhabited worlds and bringing them into the fold of the Imperium. But unbeknownst to the Emperor, as he's going around doing it, he's teaching these new worlds that he's not teaching them the imperial truth. He's teaching them that the emperor is a god, and the emperor is who you should worship, and the emperor has godlike powers and is eternal and blah blah blah. And he's basically setting up this new religion on all the worlds he conquers that is basically a religion worshiping the emperor. When the emperor finds out about this, he is pissed. He's fucking livid because this is not the way he wanted things to go. So to teach Lorgar a lesson, the Emperor orders another one of the Space Marine legions and their Primarch. He orders Rabout. I know his name is Rabute, but I'm not calling this dude Rabute. That's a stupid ass name. Fuck Games Workshop for making it that way. I'm calling him Rabout. Rabout sounds better. So he orders Rabout Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion. So he orders him and his legion to go to this planet that Lorgar has recently conquered and set up as the newest world in the Imperium, worshiping the Emperor as a god. And then he orders the Ultramarines and Robout Guilliman to just glass the planet, to just orbital bombard it into nothingness and just ash and waste. And he does that, and then he verbally chastises Lorgar and his legion that are called the Word Bearers. Each Space Marine Legion has their own name, by the way. Lorgar is the Primarch of the Word Bearers Legion. Makes sense, he's super religious, they're Word Bearers. He then chastises them and berates them and basically just really chews their ass in front of the Ultramarines, in front of a bunch of other people about how they're fucking stupid and they've been doing this thing wrong the whole time and yada yada yada, this and that. And he embarrasses the shit out of Lorgar. And Lorgar walks away from it feeling just kind of like very anti-Emperor. Now, within Lorgar's legion of Space Marines, there is this guy named Erebus, and Erebus, before becoming a Space Marine, was he knew Lorgar from their original planet, the one that Lorgar landed on, and Erebus was like a high tippy top of the hierarchy priest of the initial religion on that planet. When the Emperor showed up and convinced Lorgar to join the Great Crusade and to join the Imperium, Erebus, he smiled and he nodded, but in the back of his mind, Erebus was like, "This emperor is a fake ass piece of shit, and I will never worship him because I have already been in contact with true gods that live in the warp." So Erebus he was chaos. He was committed to chaos and the warp and the different chaos gods all along. And after this shit happened where the Emperor chastised and berated Lorgar, Erebus saw this as his moment to strike, and he basically went to Lorgar and he was like, "Yeah, the Emperor's kind of a dick. He's not worthy of our worship, but there are entities, gods out there who are worthy of our worship. And he exposed Lorgar to chaos and to the warp, and he introduced them to the warp entities Nurgle, Slanesh, Tzeentch, Khorne, and he turned Lorgar and all of Lorgar's legion, all of the word bearers, to chaos. Fast forward 7 years later, the Emperor he's found all of his Primarch sons, and the Great Crusade is going off very well. And so the Emperor says, okay, the time has come. I need to go back to Terra and get to work on that Webway project so that we don't have to use the warp for travel anymore. I'm going to name my son, my Primarch son Horus Lupercal, the Primarch of the 16th Legion known as the Luna Wolves. I'm going to name him the Imperial War Master, and he is going to be Supreme Commander of the Great Crusade from now until its completion. And so the Emperor does. Now, the Emperor, he never really thought of his Primarch sons as his sons. He never bothered or even saw the point in developing a father-son relationship with any of them. They were more like tools. They were like tools, like weapons that he created to accomplish a goal. The only one of these Primarch sons of his that he actually developed anything close to a father-son relationship with was with Horus. Now, Horus liked this fact that the Emperor took such a liking to him, but it also kind of it, it it made him feel bad because he could tell that he was being shown favoritism, and he didn't like that. He didn't like that, like, the Emperor was kind of putting him above his other Primarch brothers. He was worried that, like, I don't want the other Primarch brothers to think that I think I'm better than them just because the Emperor loves me more. It really kind of set Horus apart, and it made him uneasy. He didn't really quite like it. But the Emperor's the Emperor, and he was loyal to the Emperor. So when the Emperor decided, like, I want you to be War Master of the Great Crusade, Horus was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And he did it. And they went about their business. Meanwhile, Erebus of the Word Bearers, that traitorous little piece of shit, he obtained this sword, this sword that was corrupted by chaos, corrupted by the warp. And he saw this as his opening. He's like, I can exploit this 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 uneasiness that Lorgar has due to his relationship with the Emperor. And Erebus gave this sword to the inhabitants of this planet that Horus and his legion were going to go to war with. And so Horus and his legion, they go down to the planet, they get into war with the native people, and Horus ends up getting stabbed, wounded with this chaos-infused cursed sword that Erebus provided. Now, Horus is taken back with his taken back by his legion, and they're trying all the different forms of medicine and everything that they can do to fix him. But this power that they have, this thing that he's infected with, the power of this sword that he was stabbed with, it's something they've never seen before, and Horus is slowly dying and succumbing to it. Well, conveniently enough, Erebus and Lorgar and the Word Bearers show up, and they're like, "Yo, we've dealt with this before, all right? And if you guys really want to save your Primarch, if you really want to save Horus, you need to bring him to this specific place on our home world or whatever, where we have the experience and the training and the know-how to fix him." And Horus's Legion, the Luna Wolves, they're a little skeptical at first, but at the end of the day, they're like, I mean, it's our fucking Primarch, and he's the War Master. We don't want him to die. So, yeah, let's do it. And they take him to this lodge, and the Word Bearers conduct this ritual that's supposed to save him, but really what it does is it takes Horus's consciousness and it puts it into the warp, where he meets for the first time the four Chaos Gods. He meets Slanesh, he meets Khorne, he meets Nurgle, he meets Tzeentch. And they basically they feed upon Horus's uneasy relationship with his father, and they start feeding him all these lies and showing him these visions of the future that it shows a version of the Imperium 10,000 years from now, and it's this bloated, overzealous cult, and they all worship the Emperor, and there's giant statues, erected that look like the Emperor, and 1,000 people are sacrificed every day to keep the Emperor alive. And they basically tell Horus, like, hey, your dad's been lying to you, okay? Like, all of this, the Great Crusade, all of it, he says that it's for the betterment of humanity and it's to unite humanity. Really, all he's trying to do is obtain godhood. He's trying to just conquer the galaxy and create and obtain godhood. And Horus, by the way, like he's already been stabbed with that chaos tainted sword. So he's got that kind of like curse infection running through him. And then all this shit that these chaos entities are telling him start to kind of play on his mind. And slowly but surely, they turn Horus, the War Master, the Emperor's favorite son, to chaos. Meanwhile, Magnus the Red, the guy we see here on the left, he's one of the Primarchs, and he, out of all the Primarchs, has the greatest psychic ability, second only to the Emperor. And due to his psychic connection to the warp, he senses this interaction, this conflict going on in the warp. He senses that Horus is having this kind of like showdown, this confrontation, this meeting with the chaos entities. So Magnus projects his consciousness into the warp, and he gets there, and he arrives into the warp while Horus and the chaos gods are having their interaction, and he tries to tell Horus like, this is a lie, don't listen to them, blah blah blah. And Horus basically says, fuck you, Magnus, and he becomes corrupted to chaos anyway. So now Magnus is the only loyal Primarch to the Emperor who knows Horus has turned evil. So what does he do? He's like, well, I gotta warn my dad. I gotta warn the Emperor that Horus has turned evil. So he once again he projects his psychic consciousness across the galaxy to Terra, where the Emperor is. Now, the Emperor has set up a bunch of like psychic wards and defenses to protect itself from psychic attacks and chaos attacks and warp entities. Magnus is so powerful psychically, like I said, he's second only to the Emperor, that he just shatters right through all those defenses and he sets off a bunch of alarms and he causes a giant panic, and he kind of fucks up the Emperor's progress with the Webway project a little bit or a lot, and he does manage to make contact with the Emperor, and he's like, yo, Dad, Horus, it's going to be hard to believe, but Horus has turned to chaos. He is now a servant of the warp gods, the warp entities, and he's coming to beat your ass. The Emperor goes, I don't believe you, and I've told you about using this psychic sorcery shit. I think you're lying to me. I think you're the traitor. I'm suspicious of you, actually, so fuck off. And he tells Magnus to fuck off. Then he orders the Primarch of the Space Wolves Legion, named Leman Russ. He orders Leman Russ to take his legion to Magnus's homeworld of Prospero and abduct Magnus and bring Magnus into custody back to Terra so that he can be questioned and interrogated by the Emperor and find out what's going on. Well, Horus, being the War Master, he intercepts this communication from the Emperor to Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, and he basically changes the message, and he informs Leman Russ that the message is actually it's not go to Prospero and bring Magnus back to Terra in custody. It's go to Prospero. All of Magnus and his legion of the Thousand Sons, they are all traitors, and they've all been corrupted by the warp. You are to take your legion of Space Wolves, go to Prospero, and you are to kill Magnus and kill his legion and destroy them. Now, Horus is the War Master, so Leman Russ is, he's the War Master. The Emperor put him in charge. I'm going to do what he says. And on top of that, the Space Wolves have never had a great liking for people with psychic abilities. They're very wary of them and suspicious of them, and they know that they can be easily corrupted. So when the fact that this is coming from Horus is one thing, and then the message itself makes sense to Leman Russ. So Russ takes his Legion of Space Wolves to Prospero, and they sack it, and they just start murdering the fuck out of Magnus the Red's legion. And Magnus is like, shit, my legion is being murdered. The Emperor has lost all faith in me. All I did was try to help him. And slowly he goes, fuck the Emperor. Like, all I did was try to help him, and now he sends the Space Wolves here to murder me, blah, blah, blah. Well, Tzeentch, the chaos entity, he notices this going through Magnus's head, so he makes contact with Magnus. He's like, "Yes, the Emperor, he's a little bitch. He's a giant piece of shit, and you should not worship him. Instead, you should worship me. I can save you. I can save your people. I can save your legion. I can save your Thousand Sons Legion. If you just renounce the Emperor and swear allegiance to me, I will." Chaos magic you all the fuck away from here, and I will give you new purpose and share with you great knowledge and blah 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 and enhance your power. And Magnus, kind of with his back against a wall, goes, "Yeah, okay." And Magnus turns to Chaos and becomes a follower of Tzeentch. So now, the first real, uh, a lot of these conflicts happen simultaneously. Some of them distinctly happen one after the other. But the heresy, the galactic civil war that the Imperium goes through, that's known as the Horus Heresy, is on. So Horus and his legion have been turned to chaos. Lorgar and his word bearers have been turned to chaos. Both of them managed to together turn 3 additional legions to chaos: the Emperor's Children, the World Eaters, and the Death Guard. Now, they don't manage to turn their legions, all 4 of them. Horus also renames his shit the Sons of Horus. They don't manage to, the only one of these legions that is pure chaos at this point is Lorgar and his word bearers. The rest of them still have some space marines in the legion that are loyal to the Emperor, and they don't really like what's going on. They just don't know what to do. And the Primarchs, they are aware that there are still some marines in their legion loyal to the Emperor. So they plan this out. They go to this planet called Istvan 3, and all of the different space marines in their legions that are still loyal to the Emperor, they ordered them to go down to the planet, and because they're like, there's this alien species down there that needs to be destroyed. Go down there and destroy it. So they all go down there, they do that, and they're fighting this alien species, and they're like, this alien species isn't really that hard to kill. Like, they're not that much of a threat. What the fuck's going on? And then they start getting fucking murdered. The rest of these legions that have already turned to chaos, they start killing the loyalists within their legion. It was a way to like purge the legions and get rid of the people still loyal to the Emperor. And there's a series of books that cover this. It's the first one's called Horus Rising, second one is called False Gods, and the third one is called Galaxy in Flames. That covers everything from Horus getting turned to chaos all the way through this Istvan 3 massacre. Now, during this, this guy here named Nathaniel Garrow, he's one of the Marines from one of these legions that's still loyal to the Emperor. Him and a ragtag group of loyal Marines, they managed to take control of this ship called the Eisenstein, and they managed to get out of there and head back to Terra to warn the Emperor of what's going on. So the Horus Heresy is in full swing. They get back, they alert the Emperor to what's going on, and the Emperor's like, okay, I'm going to send a force out there to kind of quell this. And so this all goes down at another planet called Istvan. I think it was Istvan 5. I don't know why I put Istvan 6. But basically, the Emperor sends the traitor legions, the known traitor legions at this point, are the World Eaters, the Death Guard, the Sons of Horus, the Emperor's Children, and of course the Word Bearers. The Word Bearers, however, they fuck off to go fight the Ultramarines, because if you remember, when the Emperor wanted to chastise Lorgar and his legion, they had the Ultramarines be the ones to destroy that planet that they worked hard to set up. So Lorgar has kind of a bit of a feud with Rabaut Guilliman and the Ultramarines, so they fuck off to go kill them. Meanwhile, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, the Sons of Horus, and the Emperor's Children, they're all hanging out on Istvan 5, and they're planning their war against the Emperor. And the Emperor orders the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, and the Iron Warriors to go out there and put an end to this shit. Well, little did the Emperor know that the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, and the Iron Warriors had already been in contact with Horus and the Word Bearers and all these guys, and these 3 had also been turned to chaos, but they didn't know it yet. So they arrive at Istvan 5, And these three, the Iron Hands, the Salamanders, and the Raven Guard, they make planetfall, and they immediately start engaging these bottom four here in bold in combat. And the battle's going, it's going so-so, it's pretty even. So finally they go, okay, send in the other three legions so that we can do 6 versus 4 and just totally destroy them. So the other three come down, the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, the Iron Warriors, they make planetfall. And behind these guys. So now these guys are sandwiched between these three and these four. But it's okay, because these guys right here, they think these three are on their side. And then they turn on them and betray them. And this is commonly referred to as the Isfahan 5 drop site massacre. These legions are they are fucked. They get fucked up. And a couple Primarchs die. They think the Primarch of the Salamanders, his name's Vulcan, they think he dies, but he actually survives. And it's just bad. It is bad. Whereas they thought they were going to go and put an end to this little rebellion, this civil war, like, and just snuff it out. Oh, it does not go their way. The traitors who have turned to chaos, they win a major victory here, and then all of them turn their sights on Terra. Meanwhile, over at Calth, this is where I said the word bearers went to go fight the Ultramarines, because at this point during the Horus Heresy, Robout Guilliman and his Ultramarines Legion, they have brought more worlds into the Imperium and done it successfully and set them up for success than any other legion. Like Robout Guilliman, a lot of people kind of thought that if the Emperor was to name one of the Primarchs as his proxy to run the Great Crusade, a lot of people thought it would. They thought Horus was definitely going to be his number one choice due to his like favoritism that he showed Horus and the relationship he had with him. But a lot of people also kind of thought it could have been Guilliman. Guilliman's legion was the biggest by far at this point in time, and he honestly had his own little empire in the galaxy carved out called Ultramar. It was this interstellar empire of 500 worlds within the Milky Way galaxy. Ultramar, these 500 worlds, they were loyal to the Imperium, they were loyal to the Emperor, but they were governed and ruled by Robout Guilliman and the Ultramarines Legion. And Lorgar and the Word Bearers, they recognized this. They were like, Guilliman and his Legion of Ultramarines, they are a true threat. If they manage to get to Terra and help the Emperor, we will be hard pressed to win. So we're going to have to go deal with them. And they went and met the Ultramarines Legion in orbit over the planet Calth, and they performed a surprise, backstabby, just traitorous attack on the Ultramarines. And at first, it looked like they were just kicking the Ultramarines' ass, but Robout Guilliman, who is normally a very calm, collected, stoic, never loses his cool individual, when he realized what was going on and that they had been betrayed and that there was a civil, this is Space Marine versus Space Marine, Primarch versus Primarch, he was so infuriated by this that he went balls to the wall savage. And Robout Guilliman is the ultimate tactician and planner and logistician. Robout Guilliman can plan and strategize like a son of a bitch. So as soon as he realized what was going on, this just feeling of rage and betrayal and hatred for the word bearers now, combined with his ultimate strategic nature, he turned this shit around. And they managed to repel the word bearers' surprise attack. And the Ultramarines Legion stood. They did not fall. And eventually, Lorgar and his word bearers had to kind of call it. Now, meanwhile, the other traitor legions reached Terra, and they lay siege to it. And the loyal legions on Terra, keep in mind that Terra, they have millions, if not billions, of normal human beings as part of the Imperial Guard. They are just normal human soldiers. They also have the Custodes still that the Emperor first made along with the Thunder Warriors back in the day. And they have three Space Marine legions present. They have the Imperial Fists, along with their Primarch Rogel Dorn. They have the Blood Angels, along with their Primarch Sanguinius, and they have uh, the White Scars, along with their Primarch Jagatai Khan. And the Chaos Trader forces lay siege to the planet, and the battle of all battles ensues, and it culminates with, like, there are many great one-on-one duels. There is a 9-book sub-series within the Horus Heresy book series, which has over 50 books in the series. There is a 9-book sub-series just about the Siege of Terra, and I that just tells you how big and crazy of a battle this was. And it all culminates with a final duel between the Emperor and Horus. Horus receives word that Rabaut Guilliman and his Ultramarines Legion are on the way to Terra, and he realizes, he's like, fuck, if the Ultramarines and Guilliman get here, they will turn the tide and we will not win. My only hope is to just duel the Emperor one-on-one and get this shit done. So he lowers the shields on his flagship, and the Emperor comes out. He takes Rogel Dorn and Sanguinius, Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists and Sanguinius of the Blood Angels with him, and they go on up to Horus's ship. Now, they get separated on the ship, and Sanguinius is the first one to find Horus, and he duels Horus and he loses. Horus kills him. The Emperor then finds Horus, and they duel, and the Emperor is holding back. Like I said before, the Emperor is a psyker of unmatched power, and Horus, even though he is a Primarch and he is now enhanced by the powers of Chaos and the Warp, he's still no match for the Emperor. The Emperor could obliterate him like that. But the Emperor is holding back because this used to be his favorite son, and the only one of his Primarch sons that he actually even thought of as somewhat of a son. So he's holding back. He doesn't want to just obliterate him. But then Horus strikes a mortal wound on the Emperor. He mortally wounds the Emperor, and the Emperor kind of falls to the ground, and he's not dead, but it's a mortal wound, like he's gonna die. At this point in time, a random normal human soldier, Imperial Guardsman, enters the room, and because they took some normal soldiers with them too. He enters the room, and he sees Sanguinius lying dead. He sees the Emperor on his knees, wounded, and he sees Horus standing over the Emperor about to finish it. And this lowly little normal human soldier steps between the Emperor and Horus to protect the Emperor. And Horus takes his giant war mace and just swats this little dude out of the way. Kills him like that, no problem. When the Emperor sees this, when the Emperor sees Horus so nonchalantly just murder a loyal human, like when the Emperor saw this, like he saw that human soldier as the very thing that he and the Primarchs and the legions was all about. They'd been doing the Great Crusade, everything. It was about trying to create a brighter, better future for humanity as a whole throughout the galaxy. And he saw that in that one little Imperial soldier, and when Horus just swatted him out of the way like a fly, the thought just clicked through the Emperor's head that the Horus that I knew and loved like a son is gone. And once that realization, that revelation hit him, the Emperor unleashed his full psychic power on Horus, and he killed him psychically. And not only did he kill Horus physically in the real materials, real space, he burned out any and all psychic presence that Horus had within the warp. So Horus is just gone. Now, eventually Rogel Dorn catches up to them, and he finds the chamber. He finds Sanguinius dead, Horus dead, the Emperor wounded, dying. They get the Emperor back to Terra, and they set the Emperor up in this psyker life support system called the Golden Throne. And they put the Emperor on the seat. They connect him to all this machinery, and that is where the Emperor has sat for 10,000 years. And this machine is devised to keep the Emperor's psychic mind, his mind, his consciousness, his psychic being alive. But his physical body has decayed to it's a corpse. It's a corpse of bones, mostly bones, maybe a little bit of like rotted, leathery flesh on there. but that's mostly his physical form at this point, 10,000 years later. But his psychic presence is still alive and it's still out there in the warp. And he's still able to help guide humanity in many ways. I'm not going to go into him right now, but he's still able to help guide humanity a little bit. Now, Rabaul Guilliman finally of the Ultramarines, he finally shows up on Terra and he realizes he's too late and he's super pissed and sad about that. But eventually he kind of like realizes he needs to get his shit together because the Imperium is in a bad state. So he steps up and takes control of the Imperium. He becomes the Imperial Regent and the War Master. He's the leader. He's the new leader. And he writes this book called the Codex Astartes, which is basically well, first thing he does is he decides that we need to divide up the Space Marine legions into smaller groups because we don't want any one Primarch or anyone to have as much power as a full Space Marine legion should any of them ever become corrupted ever again. So he decides that they're going to divide the Space Marine legions, and he divides them up based on this book that he read called that he wrote, not read, that he wrote called the Codex Astartes, and it basically outlines how Space Marine chapters, not legions, but chapters, should be formed and regulated, and what they should consist of, and how they should operate. And yeah, some of the legions are not happy about this, like Jagatai Khan of the White Scars was not happy about it. Leman Russ was not happy about it, but they all more or less went along with it. You know, the Space Wolves and Leman Russ, they didn't quite adhere to it perfectly, like that, or they still kind of did their own thing, but they definitely broke down their legions into smaller groups. Same thing with the Imperial Fist, Rogel Dorn's legion. They didn't quite follow. The Imperial Fist did, but like one of the broken down pieces of the Imperial Fist Legion is a portion of them became this new Space Marine chapter called the Black Templars, and they have their own makeup and way that they are structured and run their chapter. But for the most part, Guilliman, he succeeded in dividing the legions and making them into smaller groups. He got the Imperium somewhat back on its feet, but eventually he went out to fight Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children Traitor Legion, and those two met in a duel, and Rabaul Guilliman gets mortally wounded by the traitor Primarch Fulgrim. He gets cut on the neck or stabbed in the neck with a tainted chaos weapon blade, and he's dying. Once again, similar to his father, in order to save him, the Ultramarines chapter take him back to his homeworld of Macragge within that 500 world system of Ultramar, and they intern him into stasis. And they put him like he's on display for 9,000 years. He's on display on Macragge. You can go into the temple and you can see him sitting in a chair in his little stasis pod with his eyes closed, and he's just in there. And he's not dead. He's not dying. The stasis thing keeps him alive. It keeps that wound in his neck from fully taking its toll. But he sits in there in stasis for 9,000 years. Now that Rabaul Guilliman is gone, and also a lot of the other Primarchs that are still alive at this point, they fucked off to go do their own things. They had certain vendettas with the traitor legions that they wanted to settle, so they went out hunting them. Leman Russ received a prophetic vision about something one day that told him he needed to go off and do some shit, so he just kind of took some Space Wolves with him and fucked off and left. He said he'd be back, but he just fucked off and left. So in the meantime, the Imperium becomes run by these douchebags, known as the High Lords of Terra, and they pretty much get rid of the Emperor's Imperial Truth doctrine, and they install what's called the Imperial Cult. And the Imperial Cult is basically it's that shit where, yeah, the Emperor is a god. We all worship the Emperor. Oh, you're worried about chaos? You're worried about chaos and the chaos gods of the warp? Don't worry about them because we have our own god. It's the Emperor. He is a god also, and he is more powerful than the chaos gods. And don't worry, his psychic presence is out there, and if you pray to him and worship him enough, he will always protect you. They build an imperial religion around the worship of the Emperor, that he's a god, and that's what kind of unites the Imperium and somewhat holds it together from this point forward. And it becomes very ultra religious and zealotous, and yeah, they form a religious organization, religious body called the Ecclesiarchy. They form organization called the Inquisition, the Imperial Inquisition, and their whole purpose is to just like go out into the galaxy and look for people who are not worshiping the Emperor enough and either interrogate them, torture them, or murder them. And slowly but surely, the Imperium, which was once this like beacon of light and hope for progress and knowledge and unity, becomes this ass backwards, religious zealot, culty empire. And it is constantly besieged on all sides by not only the forces of chaos, which are still out there, like they weren't completely, utterly defeated. After Horus was defeated, they kind of fucked off and retreated, but they're still out there. And I already mentioned the Eldar, which are not too concerned with the Imperium. Like I said, like when Slanesh was born, like 90 to 95 of their species was just wiped out. So they've got bigger shit to deal with. They got bigger problems than worrying about the human race and their wars with other shit. But they're also humanity in the Imperium is besieged on all sides by other enemies like the orcs. For those of you out there who are familiar with World of Warcraft or the Warcraft, think Warcraft orcs, but significantly less intelligent, and they have guns and spaceships and tanks and stuff like that. That's basically what you're dealing with here. They're big, they're strong, they're brutal, they're violent, they're bloodthirsty, and they just love combat and they love to fight and kill. And then you've got the Tyranids, a relatively new alien race on the scene in the Milky Way galaxy. These are these like insectoid dinosaur-like creatures that travel the galaxy on hive worlds, hive ships. And all they do is they show up on your planet, they kill shit, they eat shit, they shit it out, and then they take their shit that they shit out and they use it to build new hives. And it's weird how like this race works. Everything is bioorganic, and they are a hive mind species. So like within every hive there is a queen that's kind of controlling everything. And slowly but surely the Imperium has realized like if we can get inside the hive and kill the queen, the rest of the hive will kind of fall apart. But they are a very big threat in that like due to them being a hive mind, they just do what the queen is psychically telling them to do. They don't feel fear. Their morale cannot be broken. They don't retreat. Yeah, they just come at you, and they don't really use ranged weaponry at all. They are just monsters. So, you know, you can shoot at them all you want, but eventually some of them are going to get to you, and then it becomes a melee fight with chain swords and power swords and stuff like that. So, definitely a scary enemy. But the enemy in Warhammer 40,000 that I, for the longest time, thought was the scariest, most deadly threat was the Necrons. And these are these sentient robot beings. They used to be organic biological creatures, but they gave up their organic biological bodies in exchange for being turned into living machines by these other weird gods. Or there are these other weird space entities out there. I'm getting really deep into this, but there are these other cosmic entities out there in space. They're not chaos gods. They're not from the warp, but they are worshipped like gods they are worshipped as gods by the Necrons. And these things, they made a deal with them. It's like, hey, we can free you from mortality, but it's going to involve you guys being turned into living machines. And for a long time, they did it. They turned them into the machines, and for a long time, the Necrons went into hibernation beneath the surface of many, many worlds. And they had like temples and shit buried beneath the planet's surface. And for a long time, the Imperium, everyone had forgotten about them. They'd been down there in hibernation, asleep for so long, everyone had forgotten about them. But slowly but surely, the Imperium is colonizing worlds and digging a little too deep, and they're waking the Necrons up, and the Necrons basically just come out shooting. Like, they don't. In recent years, they've kind of like expanded upon the Necrons in the lore to give them like character. Some of them have like personality and whatnot, and they talk, and they are characters within the lore. But for the longest time, the Necrons were just this silent, like they didn't say anything. They just came at you like Terminators, and they're gonna kill you. And then last but not least, we have the Tau, Another relatively young alien species, new to the Milky Way galaxy, relatively speaking. These guys, they are very technologically advanced. They themselves are not very physically tough and big and strong, but their technology is outstanding, and they are disciplined, they are cunning, they are strategic, they are tactical, and their entire philosophy revolves around their empire, and the philosophy and doctrine of their empire revolves around the idea of for the greater good, which means all they do is philosophize on, hey, is this course of action for the greater good of the many? Is it for the greater good of the Tau Empire? It is? Cool, then we're going to do it. Now, that sounds kind of nice, but in reality, what that means is like, hey, that planet over there with like 10 billion living sentient creatures on it, yeah, I think it's for the greater good of all, for the Tau Empire and everyone in it, if we just orbital bombard that planet and kill everyone on it. And if that's what they deem, if that's what they come to the conclusion that it's for the greater good to do that, then that's what they do. So they are another enemy, adversary that the human Imperium has to face. The unique thing about the Tau, though, is that they are not at all xenophobic and xenospecific. Their empire started that way, but like let's just say hypothetically this would never happen. But if the Imperium of Man and the human race were to say, "Hey Tau, we want to join your empire," the Tau would be like, "Cool, cool, join us. We want more people to join us. We're trying to unite the galaxy." The the Tau have a lot in common with the Imperium of Man before the Horus Heresy. Now, the Emperor did always kind of like spout that like all other alien races are less than human beings and the galaxy is the dominion of the human race. But other than the fact that they are different species, the Tau Empire has a lot in common with pre-Horus Heresy Imperium of Man. So yeah, that about covers it. If you stuck through this entire video, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. That is about everything you need to know to kind of get into Warhammer 40K and start reading some of the books, start playing the video games, and kind of have an idea of what's going on. It's not everything though. I still would recommend you guys like check out some YouTube videos about more specific pieces of the lore, find out about the different legions and the Primarchs and different units within those legions. Like I said, once Rabaul Guilliman wrote the Codex Astartes and divided the legions into chapters, a lot of them became identical to each other in the different unit types and the way the chapters were structured. But other ones like the Black Templars and the Space Wolves are still very unique. So there's a lot to learn there. And yeah, this is by no means everything you need to know, and this is by absolutely no means everything there is to know. I will be doing additional videos on, you know, Warhammer 40K books to read, games to play, stuff like that. If anybody has any questions or would like a specific video over like a chapter or a faction, let me know. I'll do the best I can to find time to make those. But yeah, if you like this video, please hit that like button. That really helps out my channel. And if you want to help out my channel even more, check out some of my other videos and maybe subscribe. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys later.